What do we see when we look at this image? Number one, the carpet doesn't look moist, which is part of the story that's told about the image. Next, the wallpaper is dingy and old. We have a few defects in this and probably all the others to show that this was not a contractor putting in wallpaper. What we see back here is a wall, and this one is another not wall but a partition. Above it, or very near to it, is a sprinkler for fire suppression, and having these gaps at the top, for many, many reasons they exist, but one of them is it allows the water to spray and allows you to get away with legally putting in kind of walls that are pseudo-permanent or semi-permanent. If you're not aware of it, you can build one of these at a different location in mass, bring them into the business, drill holes on each side, and just drill or put a screw in to go into the floor if you previously mount a 2x4 or a sheet of wood to it so it'll hold it in place. And obviously in the background you can see that it's against a wider section of wall or pillar that it's been mounted to. Afterwards you can either cover it with a layer of wallpaper like it looks like it did, or if it already had it, just patch it up. The reason for changing the wallpaper mid-layer or midway could be so that each of the supposed cubicles people would be at would have different wallpaper. Also, it may have been because that was the easiest way to cover each one of them all the way around. Next characteristic of the image I'm going to bring up is besides the sprinkler in the ceiling, we can see another object over here that could be absolutely anything. Maybe a fire detector, motion detector, security, doesn't matter. Then we have an air vent, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 lights. I suspect because of the bright hot spot here, that's from that light, and this one here maybe from this one. I'm not sure that there's a bright hot spot back here. And when we look down at this corner, we see a sort of a triangle that indicates that there's a light to our right as we're looking through here, and on the other side of the wall, a similar position. And because of the light overspills going on, I am suspicious that this and maybe this are both partitions rather than a wall. I'm going to call it a wall when it goes up to the false ceiling made out of these ceiling tiles, aka sound absorbing or sound deadening tiles. But it may not go all the way up to the actual real ceiling, which would probably be bare cement. This pillar here probably does. The next thing you'll notice is that there's a doorway of sorts back here, and some people have suspected, and it very much looks like a step up to another layer, possibly made out of cement. There's also what appears to be a molding, mopboard, or baseboard here. I'm going to call it a mopboard from this point forward. That seems to be here. Maybe it's covering a dead space back there or something unsightly. It should also be noticed that these strips that are sometimes presumed to be pieces of wood are in fact a type of conduit for carrying data cables, usually high-speed internet cables and that sort of thing. And that the mopboard or whatever seems to have been built on purpose so that they could sit on top of it. One of the problems, and I've had to deal with it, when I use this sort of square pseudo-conduit for internet cabling, for instance, is that people will step on it, it comes right off the wall. By putting anything, I mean literally anything, a chunk of wood or something under it, it reinforces it to where it doesn't come loose, and also makes it to where you don't damage the wall as much, and these are easier to replace than redoing the wall. I want to point out that the lower corner here, you can see that the carpet is riding up against it, and over here. And I want to point out that way back here you can see what I call a true mopboard made out of that rubber stripping we've all seen, way back here in the back that seems to be pressed against that wall and not the others. Since this one's in place, but there isn't one underneath this piece of conduit, I'm going to assume they're part way done doing that, or they only wanted to do it there and they don't care if these get knocked down maybe. Next thing I'm going to point out is, we're going to zoom in on parts of the image, but I want to point out that I'm going to do a bunch of dimension work here in a minute based on the size of this outlet cover. And I'm also going to bring up some characteristics you may not have noticed. Now, what I'm going to say right now isn't going to be earth-shattering, but I'm going to say this. This looks like a progress report attachment for an email from somebody doing work to upgrade an office building, probably a first or second floor because of the low density of fire sprinklers. And I'm assuming it's somebody doing the carpeting that day. They may be doing the mop boards and all the other stuff as well, but I don't think they're doing the wallpaper unless they plan on painting it over or covering it with brand new wallpaper. Again, the wallpapering may have been done in an effort to create a space for people to have for their cubicle being kind of customized or personalized. Now we're going to zoom in up here to the upper right-hand corner of the image, and we're going to look at it really close, as close as I can get. This is a 640 by 480 image blown way the hell up. Again, this is not brand new. This is not recently installed wallpaper. It should be noted at that point, we must assume that the only thing brand new is the carpet. It looks way too consistent for it to be anything else. I also want to point out that the wallpaper here is one type, and then right on the edge, it's another one where we have stripes going up and down. That doesn't look like bare wood to me. That also happens in some of the other areas back here. And that indicates strongly that the wallpaper was done in strips, wrapping all the way around, and then on the opposite side, it would be wrapped around, and this pattern would show on the edge of whatever that chunk was. And those are more likely than not removable and repositionable. Wallpaper, if you're not aware of it, has to have an infinitely repeatable pattern in both X and Y. But up here we see a line. This could be a ceiling, or it could be a partitioning thing where they put, like back here, they might have put up a box, literally anything up here, to fill in the space from here up to the ceiling to make a more of a separated area, and they may have just used a different sort of wallpaper. And it very much looks like it's a section of this wallpaper turned 90 degrees, and that's the bottom edge of it. That could also be a sign that that's a top for some ceiling in some hallway, maybe. Now I'm going to bring up the other partitions. They might be thinking, what other partitions or what other walls? A lot of people are presuming this is a hallway, but this may be one partition, two partition, etc., and this is a partition. This could be a long, skinny building section we're looking at, and these are the partitions, and that may be the actual access into there. We may not be standing in a hallway. Now I'm going to bring up that there are more than just this one, and this one partition, or walls. There's 1, 2, 3, and then there's 4, 5, and 6. Let's zoom in just a teensy bit. Now you may be able to see it a little easier here, but you see that there's a black line here, and it gets thicker here, and then you see a white line after it that interrupts the background. Then the white line goes away, the black line comes back, and then a slightly thinner black line. This from here to here is another partition directly behind this one. And then the thicker line represents the next one behind that. So we're now at 3 partitions, and that black line goes from here to here. And that is consistent with the way all the angles work. And then way far back, we have set off from the back, possibly yet another partition that is from here to here in height. I also want to point out again that I am going to be doing an extrapolation here that is not based on me being an expert. I'm not an artist. I'm not able to do this perfectly. But I'm roughing this out because I want to also model this in a video game to see if I can. Also, it should be pointed out there's other objects in the image, but I'm not worried about that. So let's discuss next stage. Someone ran the image, the oldest one they could find, through an image analyzer to figure out, can we prove it's authentic, altered, edited, whatever. And they came to an odd conclusion. They were able to figure out most likely the vintage of what camera was used to make it because of the way the image was compressed. It still showed compression characteristics and defects that we'd find in early 2002 to 2004 manufactured cameras. It's just a camera. It's the kind of camera that a contractor would have at a work site to take a quick image and send it to their boss saying, this is as far as I've gotten doing the carpeting. Okay? Okay. Now I'm going to use the outlet here and its dimensions to try to extrapolate the others. There's going to be a huge margin for error. Take this with a giant mountain of salt. Here we go. So here's what I was able to extrapolate out in sizes. That opening, I'm not calling it a doorway, is 7 foot 4 inches tall or taller and at least 5 feet wide. The most likely cause of that is using panels like this that are pre-made and running them from one wall to the other in, and then the dead space is simply treated as a thoroughfare rather than a doorway. Now, I've depicted this having a wallpaper change equaling a filler block and or a ceiling or just a filler here. And there could be one over here, and there may be one that goes over the entire thing. The image stops right here, so we don't know. Also, I've put in an image here of a ceiling light, approximately where the next one would be. It may or may not have been there, or it may have been disabled. I'm pretty sure it wasn't on, but I don't know. I'm just throwing this out here. Next, there's emphasis added. I've line drawn the pillar, I'm going to call it, back in the background. This is probably bolted to. The idea when you do these, and I've done these only a couple of times in my life, is you find any damn thing to bolt them to. You bolt them to the wall over here by drilling holes on one side or another and bolting them in place and then covering up the holes with whatever's available, like maybe behind that trunking or conduit tubing. On the floor, you usually put down a 2x4 or a set of strips thick enough that you can put a screw into it, but you nail them in place with cement-penetrating nails, usually driven by nail gun blanks or something. Anyway, and then you screw it to the floor, and that's good enough. To mount it to the ceiling, you'd have to be able to get behind here, put a screw from this side, and put another sort of a framework up there, or you put in a ceiling block from one side to another, covering a very long strip of 2x4s you nail in place so that it has more rigidity, and then you from there mount it to the ceiling with a triangle block or just put in a big block that's like this. And if this has the wallpaper going left to right instead of up to down, that would indicate that they basically took one of these things, chopped it really roughly with a saw, stuck it up there, shoved it in place, then put screws in to hold it in there, and then put screws into here to hold it in place so that they could make a decently mounted gap. I don't know if they did it on the left, but I'm pretty sure they did it on this right side. Next, I lined up the conduit here, back to here, and back to here, and they're very consistent in straight line mode only, and when I did it to this way, I got this, and that works out pretty straight this way. Now, if we continue this across, it really, really comes close to just skipping right underneath the outlet. So the highest likelihood here is that on both sides of these walls or on either side, they put in the conduit, they drill from this side over, put it through their cables, and then cover them with the conduit. And that also means that on the back side of that power outlet, on the other side of that wall, or what we'll call a partition, they may have had another piece of conduit. And yes, I know you're not supposed to run 120 volt cabling through that conduit, but it isn't technically illegal in some areas. So I don't know. You'd have to figure that out yourself. The image had to be taken after the year 2002 or 2004, depending on which specific camera. What is the oldest version of this image we have available to us? The oldest version we have is from 2008 April, so far. The image is probably much older than that. We will never really know until we find older and older versions. One of the places, in fact, the main place it was posted, was on 4chan. 4chan has many, many subdirectories or boards, as they're called. One of them was labeled B for random. And in that random board, on April 8th, 2018, at 4:12 a.m. GMT, or Greenwich Mean Time, or England time, someone put up a listing saying, post your cursed images. A little over an hour later, at 5:13 a.m. and 50 seconds, someone posted an image, and it was this image. The image, when it's uploaded by 4chan, depending on how they set it up that month, will then rename the actual file itself after the time and date stamp. Now, it uses a time and date stamp that's very unfamiliar. It uses Unix time. Unix time counts the number of milliseconds, or thousandths of a second, since a specific date, sometime in 1970. And in this case, it posted it as a file named 1523.1644.30.76.0.jpg. That matches up exactly with 5:13 a.m. and 50 seconds on the 8th of April 2018, just like the posting. Now, the file was named originally by the person uploading it, something they can alter, control, or fake, the name of the file, 1342 yada yada. That corresponds with a Unix time of 2012, July 15th. I think this is a red herring to chase, number one, because they could have just named it that, and number two, it doesn't indicate truly that it came from 4chan or any other place for that file name. The next thing is, I looked up that file name, and all I found was the same web board. When I looked up its MD5 sum hash, SHA1 hashes, they all led back to this board. None of them led to another website. Now, that doesn't mean that it wasn't uploaded earlier. That just means that deciding that it having a Unix time someone could have easily falsified is not likely. It is definitely older than April 8th, 2018, but saying it has to be from 2012 is not valid. Are these modular office freestanding walls or partitions, as they're normally called, or are they nailed in place contractor jobs? I can't tell. Someone out there would have to decide better.